How many people can speak English proficiently? Which countries have the better English speakers who are not native speakers but speak it as a second language? Is AI helping us improve in our English learning? Today, we're answering these questions and we'll see definitely more data about this because just like every year, the EF-EPI report has been published. This is the EF English Proficiency Index, a ranking considering a number of people who take tests from all over the world, and we can analyze certain data and derive some conclusions. This video is for the nerds. I am deeply in love with languages. One of the main reasons why I love also my job is because I can help and tutor people to succeed in their language journey, guide them through the process. And I also love the idea that in a certain period of your life, you cannot understand sentences, expressions, words, texts. And then after a long period of work and consistency, you can decode what you couldn't some months prior to that. And that's wonderful. English is well established as the de facto language of communication between those who do not share another language. Proficiency levels are not rising. Our data indicates the contrary. Language acquisition is a time-consuming undertaking. So no, if you're clicking on a video which says you learn English in 10 days, that's just a clickbait video and the content might be extremely useful, but you're not learning English in 10 days. I've talked about this also here. You can watch the video if you're curious. This report is based on the results of 2.1 million adults who took the EF SET English tests in 2023. I actually took it, but in 2024, so I'm gonna be in next year's report. I'm going to be one of those millions of people. 2 million of people if we consider the global number of our population. It's not that big chunk of people, but it is still considerable. And obviously we're considering people who have an internet connection, people who want to test their English level. So yeah, these are some things we need to take into consideration. Something that really shocked me is that the English language is in decline. And 60% of the countries that are in the index, so in the ranking, they scored lower points compared to the previous year. What? Even though many of these changes are small, this is a downward trend. So a downward trend, it means that the tendency of these countries is that instead of improving their English, the level is decreasing. So it's a downward trend, downward, going down. The number of people who can speak good English is going down. There is a slackening of interest in developing English proficiency beyond current levels. Many people say, okay, I got to this point. I do not want my English to be better. This is divided into feminine and masculine gender, so we need to take that into consideration. And there is a consistent gender gap also here. And the fact is that for women, their English level seems to be consistent and stable, whereas for male population, it's declining. But the difference is still there. Despite this change, there's still a difference. One of the continents that is suffering more when it comes to English learning is definitely Asia, and it doesn't come as a surprise. This is the region of the world where the most of the decline has occurred. Instead, Africa has improved its level, so we have very different situations. I am from Europe, so I of course wanted to also take a look at what's happening here. We'll get to it in a moment. Overall, there are parts in which there is a steady progress. In some parts, there's a steady decline, nothing too obvious. If you're curious about your own country, you can continue looking at this report, and there is a beautiful map using different colors. Each color represents a different band. So a band is a category. If you're included there, you can definitely do some things with the language. For example, in Europe we have the CEFR. I very oftentimes mention it in my videos. So there are different levels, different bands. There is the A1 band, A2 band, and here we have very high with a dark blue color, high with a dark green color. For example, just like my shirt today, this is for high levels, moderate levels. So not too good, not too bad. I would probably believe this is a sort of intermediate and the low intermediate level. So this is the light green. This looks like a military green almost. Then we have low levels, which is ochre, so it's a yellow, a dark yellow. And then we have very low levels, which is orange. And then if you scroll, you have different numbers. So you have the ranking, and you have the name of the country, and then the score, which is a metric used by the EF to calculate the proficiency. It's not what we are focusing on, to be honest. It's not about the number, but the relationship between different numbers. I live in Italy, and Italy is not famous for being good in English, and that's also quite visible in this chart. What broke my heart is that Italy is in moderate proficiency, and it's in the middle, let's say, of this category. So it's a middle moderate proficiency kind of country, 46th. And frankly, I'm not shocked, but I'm disappointed because I've made an entire video in Italian about learning English, and I know how many people struggle with this language. I see it every day at work. It frustrates me, to be honest. And my second country, another country I belong to, is Poland, because I'm from Poland originally. Poland, on the other hand, scored extremely high because it is 15th, so it's a very high ranking. Tell me in the comments what number is your country, what place in this ranking is your country. I'm very, very curious. The fact about Poland, I also noticed it when I went to university. People were very okay with English, whereas here in Italy, you can really struggle sometimes if you don't speak any Italian. If you go to an area which has a lot of tourism going on, it's not an issue, it shouldn't be an issue. If you go to the outskirts of the city, or you go to a village, a town, a rural area, things get tricky for non-Italian speakers. This could get even worse and worse the more we scroll down this index. So we have low proficiency, we have very different countries. And by looking at the map is a lot of Asia, a very big chunk of Asia. There is part of Africa, and there is also part of especially Central and Southern America. Obviously, in this report, you won't see the United States or the United Kingdom or Canada or Australia, New Zealand. They do speak English as a first language, so that's a different story. You can also see the capital cities, so you don't look at the general country, you focus on the capital. Again, same stuff for Poland and Italy. Warsaw was in the very high proficiency. Rome was in the moderate proficiency. Then if you're not a big of a reader, but it's interesting to read all the different detail, I think that this kind of English is very interesting to also know and read. Always comparing For example, productivity, global innovation, all the different sections that are considered. And then you can find a paragraph describing the situation and a map, a graph showing you overall how these different countries, based on their proficiency, how do they score in terms of. And overall, you can see that the lower the English level, the tendency is that they also have lower productivity, lower talent competitiveness. There are maybe sometimes some exceptions, but usually it's a direct proportion. So the countries that have a better proficiency, they are obviously countries which are developed. So they are from the first world. They also score brilliantly in other fields, such as health, work, transport, social support, anything that comes to your mind. Usually there is this direct tendency, with, of course, exceptions. I don't want to dig into too deep of a topic, but we can see that English levels are also associated with this kind of tendency. Usually English is considered a key element for globalization. If you can communicate with different countries using one common language, it's quite easier to also manage and succeed in different deals, successfully achieving partnerships. Whereas countries which are focused on their own language and those which do not focus on improving this, they definitely lag behind. This is an expression used also in the article. They lag behind and they suffer from this lack of knowledge because they cannot have the same competitive advantage. I always think about what I know from also my own experience and looking at the different job functions. Definitely IT workers, yes, also in my experience, they have very good English knowledge or they are trying to obtain one and their levels are always sort of intermediate or advanced. Whereas when it comes to other fields, again, human resources, marketing, accounting and finance, strategy and planning, these are fields where English is somehow included in their job. If you think about marketing, whereas small businesses, for example, technicians, maintenance, admin, yes, sales, these are fields in which English is a bit lagging behind. Think about artigianato in Italy. If they live in a small town or small village, why would they even care about learning English? Social mobility is a topic that is extremely dear to me. For individuals, English opens doors, broader access to information, a higher salary, more varied educational opportunities, and greater independence from one's local labor market. I always imagine the situation in which you are in your own country and you, for some reason, decide that you'd like to have a better job opportunity. You'd love to learn more. You'd love to travel. You'd love to get to know more people from different cultures. Having access to English and that type of knowledge gives you the permission of deciding one day, let me travel to this country and let me see if I would like to live there one day and maybe plant some roots in that country and start a new life, start a new career, maybe building a family abroad, because in that country, thanks to my English knowledge, I can have double of what I earn here. The healthcare system is much better. I have the freedom to choose that instead of being forced to accept whatever you have in your own region. Speaking English allows people to engage with those outside their bubble. Somebody, for example, from Tanzania or somebody from Madagascar, from Brazil, could be watching this video. I have a lot of Brazilian people watching me. I do not speak Brazilian Portuguese, and they do not speak Italian or Polish because these are our native languages. They can watch my videos. We are used to this idea that English is so widespread, but that's truly mind-blowing if you just stop for a second and think about it. You have access to people and access to places where without English you wouldn't understand a word, or you could not be assisted in any kind of way. I'd really love you to take a moment, if you're curious, and have a look at all the different infographics, all the different trends. And then let's go to the conclusion part. And that's one of my favorite parts. We can see a general summary of what we've seen with some notes and some considerations. And I love the fact that AI has been included into this. It would be easy to mistake the findings of this report as an indication that English is so omnipresent, so essential, that professional success and personal happiness depend upon mastery of the language. That is patently not the case. So yeah, I love English, it is so powerful, but it doesn't mean you're successful. If you even think about Asia, some countries such as Japan or China or South Korea, they are strong countries, economically and globally strong countries, but their English knowledge is not so strong after all. However, the English demand has become ubiquitous. I've talked about this word in some of my previous videos. Ubiquitous means everywhere. It's everywhere. It's present in any place that you can think of. I constantly get asked about tips to learn English. I get asked how to improve English. I get asked to teach English. And this is something that it's in a market that it's already flourishing. The English market, when it comes to teaching, it's flourishing. There's constant demand and more people want to learn the language. Here, AI has not been deeply investigated, and we can also see that in general, this is something mentioned as a tool that is going to change with time and is going to improve, and we're going to see much stronger effects with the years that are to come. I've already used some tools provided by AI, for example, for French learning, and I was just astonished at the quality, and I'm pretty sure that with years we're going to see such an improvement. And it can be scary also for me because that's my job, but at the same time I think, and this is also mentioned here, for English teachers, current applications of AI primarily revolve around brainstorming, generating lesson plans, classroom content, but this does not replace the role of a human person, and I strongly and firmly believe in that. AI is a very good virtual assistant, and human interaction is essential, in my opinion, because after all, we're learning languages to communicate and also to work, but we still work for other people, with other people. I would never consider replacing some human aspects of the language for AI, like 100%. For adult learners who are often studying online already, the temptation to replace human teachers with AI coaches will be strong, especially given how scalable and inexpensive that solution would be. However, the same privacy concerns apply to adults, so it was mentioned for children and teenagers, and a lack of human interaction, uneven quality, and a sense that no one is invested in your progress could strongly dampen motivation, one of the defining characteristics of the successful language learner. We have recommendations, and these are cool because they are divided for different categories of people. So we have companies, governments, education authorities, teachers, schools, universities, and individuals. If you're an individual, which is probably a big part of the people who are watching this, play the long game. So essential, so essential. Plan for hundreds of hours that it takes to move from one level, so from one proficiency level to another. It's not days, it's not weeks, it's hundreds of hours. Please bear that in mind. It's also mentioned here. It's not just me saying it. Study English every day, even in small chunks. Take breaks, especially when you feel your attention waning. So your attention is not as sharp and is not as intense as it is at the beginning. If you feel it's waning, take a break. Even during this video, if you've taken any breaks, good job. It's not a crime. It's not wrong at all. Set specific, achievable goals, write them down. And another tip which I have highlighted, there's all these tips in my opinion are great. One which I would never take for granted, and I did not imagine it here. Use social media in English. Set your computers, your apps, your favorite AI to English. So I've also spoken about this in my video about French tools. I switched all my devices into French, and doing the same also for your social media, trying to follow content and getting more of that language kind of input helps so much. Let's end the video here. It was quite long. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you knew about this. I'm very curious to read all your numbers down below. Thank you so much. I'll see you in my next video.